Hello, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and together with my friends from allfreeknitting.com, I'm going to show you a way to make a tonal kettle dyed effect on your yarn on the stovetop. Today we're going to be using as a base 100 grams of bare stroll fingering yarn from Knit Picks. And this is a technique where we are not going to pre-soak the yarn, so there isn't a lot that you need to do before you can start. I'm wearing gloves to protect my hands from any dyes that we use. To start on my pot, I have 8 cups of water, and I'm going to add, just over 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. So we need heat, we need acid, which comes from the vinegar. We've got our wool yarn, and we need dye. And the dye that I am using today comes in the form of these dye pellets that were part of a Easter egg dyeing kit. So I'm going to add these pellets, 1 green and 1 blue, to my pot that contains about a tablespoon of vinegar. It's not really an exact science, and 8 cups of water. And you can see the color is coming out of those dye pellets. Now, you could try to get variegated yarn by just adding the wool and adding the pellets directly and letting the swirls of color happen. But I want to make a more subtle coloration. So I'm actually going to stir this to let my colors dissolve into a nice teal. So the pellets are still dissolving a bit, but at this point I'm going to start heating up our dye bath. So I'm putting it on a low heat and I'm stirring it. And the way that the kettle dyed effect is going to happen is because the base yarn that we're starting with is dry, the color is going to get wicked in at different amounts as the yarn starts to get wet. So I'm going to bring this dye bath to a light simmer while covered, so that way I don't reduce the water level too much. Our dye bath is now simmering. See how dark it looks? So I'm now going to take the pre-soaked, so the completely dry stroll yarn, and slowly, well, not too slowly, but add it to the pot. So you'll see that it doesn't go in, so I'm going to use a slotted spoon to gently start submerging the yarn. This is superwash wool, so it is machine washable and can withstand some amount of heat, but I don't want, I still don't want it to felt, so I'm going to handle it with care as I push it in. Alright, so now that the yarn is all submerged, you can see that, you know, we had a pretty uniform dye before, but it is appearing in different colors on here, but on the yarn right now, but we'll see how that continues. I am going to recover the pot so that way it doesn't run dry, and we will come and reduce the heat, because we want it to be a light simmer, not a roaring boil. And I'm going to cover this, and we'll be back to check on our yarn in a little bit. Alright, it has been 10 minutes since I added the yarn to the dye bath. Let's gently move the yarn aside, and there is still some color in the dye bath, but a lot of the color is in the yarn. And you can see that there is some variation. That isn't the light, that's actually some subtle variation in the color of this kettle dyed yarn. If there is still a lot of color in the dye bath and the dye has not exhausted to the level that you would like, then you can let the yarn continue to simmer for a while. But since most of the color is in the yarn, I am going to turn off the heat and let the yarn sit in the dye bath and let the rest of the color absorb as it cools off to a temperature that I can handle comfortably. So I'm going to, once again, recover the yarn just because I don't want too much water to evaporate. The dye has exhausted and it's still a little too hot to handle. So I'm going to use my slotted spoon to pull the yarn out of the pot. Let some of the water drain. There's still a little bit of color left in there, but most of the color is in fact in our nice yarn. And then I'm going to place the yarn onto a plate so it can cool and so I can wash it. Alright, well I've got some lukewarm water here and I've added our beautiful Kettle dyed yarn. And you can see that the water is already very clear. But just to be sure, I'm adding some mild dish soap to the bath. And just, rinse and repeat until all the excess dye is out of the yarn. So there we have it, our beautiful tonal yarn that has bits of pale blue mixed with more of a tealish green. And I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial on how to achieve a kettle dyed effect starting with dry yarn. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and this video was brought to you by allfreeknitting.com.